Insurance isn't our only passion at UFG Insurance. We're dedicated to supporting the communities where we live and work. We proudly offer our employees paid time off to volunteer. Their work is making a positive difference across the U.S. UFG's Go Beyond Award is presented to one employee annually for exceptional community service. Striving to deliver on our promises is more than what we do. It's who we are. For a company promising community support, think UFG.
Just want to welcome everyone to our session for Iowa Ideas. This is session 5 in the Community and Economic Development track, the future of public transit. I want to first thank our sponsors, UFG Insurance and ITC Midwest. And for sponsoring that conversation today, we're really excited to talk today about the future of public transit in Iowa. Iowa lacks the robust public transit options that are essential for Iowans without cars and to reduce carbon emissions amidst a climate crisis. From micro-mobility to bike trails to fare-free transit, we're going to explore today what Iowa communities are offering for getting around and what more sparsely populated rural communities can do to get better connected. So we have a really great panel set up today, and I'd like to start by asking our panelists to introduce themselves and maybe provide not only a brief background about themselves, but their connection to the topic. Darian, we'll start with you.
Thanks so much, Katie. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm always excited to talk about transportation and transit. I'm the Director of Transportation Services for the City of Iowa City. I've been working in the transportation field for, it's 17 or 18 years now. I'm really interested in how we can better support all modes of transportation, not just necessarily personal automobiles, which has really been a focus of transportation planning, I would say, for the greater part of the last 100 years. So I've been working in transit specifically for the last 7 to 8 years on working on ways that we can improve the transit system in Iowa City for those that rely on it, but also make it an easier choice for others.
And Mike, if you could share a little bit of your background and your connection to the topic.
I'm Mike Barnhart. I'm the CEO at Horizons in Cedar Rapids. I've been working in transportation for 24 years. I started as the Executive Director of Neighborhood Transportation Service, which is truly a grassroots transportation organization. We started out of a town hall meeting in Cedar Rapids in 1993 or 94, where the neighborhoods got together and decided that they didn't have transportation at night and on the weekends, and they partnered with the city government here. And attendance of their neighborhood meeting was a city council person and the director of transportation, and they got together and wrote a HUD grant and purchased one minivan, and that's grown to a much larger service. And we serve basically the metro area and beyond with other services. And myself, I come at it, I think it's a little different coming at it from the nonprofit sector. My background, I have a social work background. So I partner with a lot of nonprofits in the area here, and it's love transportation and love making the difference in people's lives. And thanks for having me.
Wonderful. So Darian, I would like to start with you and maybe start talking about Iowa City's very busy last couple of years with public transit. And you've been at the forefront of a lot of innovative public transit. What are some of the most successful strategies that you've implemented, and maybe how could they serve as models for other similar Iowa communities?
That's a great question, and we've had our hands full. We've been very busy at Iowa City Transit trying to find ways that we can improve the service for the community. And really over it's probably been about 7 years in total since we've conceptualized the Iowa City area transit study. But we've come to the realization that there's really 3 ways that you need to improve transit systems to make it, again, more a service that's better for those that rely on it, but make it an easier choice for others. And so there's 3 ways. So the first is improve the service. The second is improve the fare. And the third is improve the infrastructure. And I won't talk as much about that one because we are just now getting into the infrastructure piece of things, but I'll talk about the first 2. So improving the service, making faster more frequent and more reliable transit service is the way to make better transit service for those who rely on it and an easier choice for others. And so with the Iowa City Area Transit Study that we implemented, well, I should say that we kicked off the study in 2019. We implemented our first round of changes in 2021. And that was first and foremost a complete transit system redesign. So we took the whole system and said, does this make sense the way that we're offering service today? We involved the community. We had over 1,200 points of contact with the community, numerous public workshops throughout the process, having a really robust public outreach process is just critical for developing a plan of something on the magnitude that's so great as to change the entire transit system. But we powered through that process with a pandemic, intermixed in there too. But we came out the other end with a system that was faster, more frequent, more reliable, that better meets the needs of our customers today. And again, better meets the needs of a greater number of Iowa Cityans, which was our goal, is to attract more people to transit and for it to become a transportation option of choice in Iowa City. So those are just a few ways we improved the service. The second bullet that I mentioned was improving the fare. So with that transit study, we did our first round of changes to our fare system and fare policies to help make it a better choice for community members. And we aligned our fare system with Coralville at that time so that all passes were interchangeable on either system. And so that our policies were identical so that it was easy. There was no confusion about, is this a Coralville policy? Is this an Iowa City policy? Because of course we work with Coralville and Canvas as a 3-agency system in the metro area. So it became really important that we aligned our policies to the best way possible. And then the other part of that was that we reduced the fares at that point for those who needed it most. So we eliminated the fare for seniors, we reduced the fare for youth, and we eliminated the fares for those with disabilities. So that was our first step towards improving the fares and making the fares better, making the fares more accessible for the community. And then you fast forward to August of 2023, and we made an even bigger jump forward, which is we decided to pilot making the entire system fair for all riders. And that benefits every single person on every single ride, every single day we offer service. So we are 1 year into our fare-free pilot. It's been an overwhelming amount of positive feedback from the community, which has been really great. And we've seen our ridership increase in 1 year, 43%. So by simply removing that barrier, and whether it's a cost barrier or just a barrier, it's something you have to do. You have to go get a pass. You have to, renew your pass. It's just another thing you have to do. Again, that creates another barrier. So just removing that fare and making it easy for people to hop on board has made a big impact on transit ridership in Iowa City. It's made a big impact on our ability to reduce carbon emissions. It's made a big impact on our ability to provide an equitable and sustainable transportation source to the community.
And then you talked a little bit about infrastructure.
Yeah.
Can you preview what you're thinking with that and what's on deck for Iowa City?
Sure. So where we're turning to now is our bus stops. We are looking for ways that we can make our bus stops more comfortable, safe, well lit, have amenities that our transit riders want to see, seating, benches, lighting, trash cans, shelters, all of those types of amenities that really make it easy and comfortable for people to use transit. So that's the direction we're heading next. We are hoping to have a consultant on board to help us evaluate every transit stop in the whole community and then create a plan for recommendations on how we can improve stops. Not all stops will need all the same amenities. I mean, ridership is clearly a factor. There's other factors that vary kind of by transit stop, but creating a plan so that we can continue to invest in the transit system and again, attract more. Our goal is to continue to attract more riders to transit. We have an explicit goal of reaching 1.91 million riders on transit by the year 2030. And that goal will help us reach our transportation's emissions reduction goal in our climate action plan. So we have a transit goal tied to our climate action initiatives in our climate action plan. So we're really looking for all the ways that we can make the transit system more attractive and a transportation option of choice for the community.
That's awesome. Now, Mike, can you talk a little bit about kind of that transit option of choice? We often hear that route timing or drops are inaccessible or inconvenient. Can you talk a little bit about the public-private partnerships that you've created with Cedar Rapids and now Johnson County to ensure public transportation's, is accessible to everyone?
Sure, I think I'll talk a little bit about what we currently do here, and I'll say Darren, you're doing a great job there, and I think that those free rides are fantastic. And just a little, we are in a whole different situation as NTS as a nonprofit than a publicly governmental agency, and there's advantages and disadvantages to that. But the service we're most known for, I touched on a little bit, is our after hours and weekend employment transportation. We operate opposite hours of the Cedar Rapids fixed route and paratransit service. And paratransit, for those who don't know, it's an obligation for the public fixed route service to provide for people with disabilities. And it's run by Lynn County Lifts up here. And we're fortunate that we live in a very supportive community. The cities of Cedar Rapids, Marion, and Hiawatha all support us financially, as well as the United Way of East Central Iowa. And when I go to transportation conferences, other communities want to know how we're able to provide our night and weekend service. And I, had many conversations with Johnson County or Iowa City over the years, trying to figure out a solution for them as well. And what we have is really the only way we're able to do it is because of the local support. And we're very lucky to have gotten that back in 93 or 94, whenever that first year was, to get us started. And then once we got it started, it's hard to take it away, right?
Mm-hmm.
And our current hours for service are we operate Monday through Friday. These are kind of weird hours. We start at 2 o'clock in the morning and run till 6:30 a.m. And then we start again at 7:30 p.m. and run till 12:30 a.m. So we have a couple-hour gap there at night. We just found, we went through we looked at the best way to use the funding, and we cut out a couple hours there that were really an hour and a half, I guess, that were really low use hours. There was maybe one person using it, and we shuffled their rides around. And then Saturday, we run from 5 a.m. to 9 in the morning, and then 5 to midnight at night. And Sunday, basically all day. We run from 5 a.m. to 12:30 at night. And most of the folks that use NTS for an employment ride do so because they don't have another affordable way to get to work. Their only option would be an Uber or a taxi, and that's just not an affordable option. The cost for an NTS ride, it used to be $6 a ride, and the city of Cedar Rapids bought that down this year to $3 a ride to try to make it more affordable. I'm sorry, I'm a little disconnected from transit as what I used to be, but I think Cedar Rapids lowered their fare from like $1.50 to $1. So they lowered that. They wanted us to, the nighttime price to be as low as well. So we're $3 a ride, and this allows our riders to save money for rent, food, childcare, et cetera, and access jobs geographically that they could not afford to go to on an Uber or taxi if they're a long distance. It's a flat fare, $3. So an Uber, Cedar Rapids is a pretty big metro area. It could be up to a $20 or $30 Uber ride if you live on the other side of a town. For example, if you lived in Marion and worked in the far west side, it'd probably be about $30 a ride. And the affordable is very important, as most of our riders are lower income. The median income for our riders is $22,500. That's not very much. And just kind of a snapshot of our riders, 53% of our riders are non-white. 36% of those are African-American compared to 8% of the Cedar Rapids population. 96% of our customers report they earn more money because of the availability of NTS. And that number has really gone up as we switched to an app a few years ago. They used to have to schedule rides 24 hours in advance or their weekend rides on Friday. So if you think about a restaurant or even any job where you're offered overtime, and especially if you're not earning a lot of money, you want to be able to take that overtime. When they had to schedule in advance, we just often we couldn't fit that in. The schedules were rigid, they were already there. So now with the app, they're able to reschedule their ride and they can accept that overtime. So it's a big improvement that way. And most of the folks receive benefits through their jobs, which I think is very important. 90% report that they receive medical, retirement, vacation, etc. And 98% report greater independence. And a question we started asking this year was, do you feel like you have a more secure future? And 97%, I mean, that's a huge number, reported a more secure future. And it's just such a basic thing, getting to work. I used to always ask when I went out and spoke is, first, how did people get here? And pretty much everybody drove a car. They don't think about it if they don't have a car. And I think everybody agrees that transportation shouldn't be a barrier to employment. And, the impact of this, of course, they earn more money and they have more opportunities and they're more independent. And I feel like I've gone on there for a long time. I've got more to say if you want to say it, but
well, we have lots of good time today. We've got 45 minutes still to talk about this, and I want to welcome our third panelist, Nate Asplund. I'm wondering if you could introduce yourself, share your connection to the topic, and then I'm going to ask you a really tough question.
Katie, thank you. First of all, apologize, I don't have the preferred background. Somehow my desktop's not working, and this is courtesy of Apple. My name is Nate Asplund. I'm with Railroad Development Corp. I'm calling from Peru, Lima, Peru today. My role with RDC is president of PopUp Metro. It is a new method to introduce light rail transit on a much more expedited basis, and for us to be able to allow communities like the Iowa City, Cedar Rapids area to actually try it out. Everything's on a lease. We have very low cost of entry, and it allows for the first time for light rail transit to occur where you're not estimating anything. You're measuring your community, your citizens' use of a new service, and you actually get real numbers, real results, and can be introduced in a matter of months versus a matter of years. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Great. Well, so Nate, we've worked a little bit together through Greater IC and Better Together in my role in community development there. And so we've explored the PopUp Metro concept here in Iowa City. Could you talk a little bit about your experience in the railroad sector and how you would see the Crandic system integrating into our broader public transit options?
Absolutely. So I've worked on multiple sides of the rail industry. I've been with the BNSF Railway. I did public-private partnerships where we got legacy infrastructure that took years to remedy. We got things fixed. Often the way we did that was by partnering with commuter rail entities and with Amtrak to provide a broader set of benefits for fixing legacy infrastructure that frankly is from the 19th century, and it was not capable of performing functions, and was also impacting air quality, congestion in our communities, and we made that happen. On the passenger side, I was CEO of the Florida East Coast Railway. We were the freight host for that fancy project called Brightline, running from Miami to Orlando, and worked with that team. And then here with RDC, I do things across the world. My favorite place is Iowa, just to clear the record. Like here in Lima, Peru, we're working on a large project. We have a freight railway in Lima that goes from the top of the Andes to the port. And we are working with the municipality of Lima, the Ministry of Transport, the U.S. Embassy to establish a heavy commuter project on top of our freight rail business. It can be done. I think what makes it unique, what we do at RDC, is we are from both sides of the spectrum of railroading. Oftentimes, passenger alignment, passenger initiatives are not understood by freight people. On the other side, the freight people don't understand the urgency, the objectives, the benefits of passenger rail. Because we work on both of them, we bring those parties together. So PopUp Metro is a mechanism to use existing right-of-way that might be low density. It may not handle freight every hour of every day. It may be a commuter line that is not used right now, and use that existing corridor, needs a little few upgrades to be the platform to put a pop-up metro service in place. So where it really works great in the Iowa City area is the Krandic. They're a partner of ours. We interchange tens of thousands of carloads with the Krandic each year. Their leadership is engaged and wants to make this project work to where we would put the pop-up metro battery trains on the Krandic. The initial phase would be from West Bergen Road to Burlington Street, then expand that as well up to North Liberty. The history of that line, the history of the Krandic on that location is interurban. That's left over from the 20th century, but it was a mechanism that before we had freeways, before we had large thoroughfares, there were small units of transit, rail transit that really served these communities. And that's how the line was originally built. So taking an idea of years ago, reimagining it, understanding each other's objectives, understanding each other's challenges, putting the package together and making something happen. One of the concerns and why do we do this? Well, our chairman, Henry Posner III, does not play golf. He doesn't have a boat. He doesn't really have any hobbies except his passion for mobility. And we looked at what's happening in the USA, where it's very difficult to start these types of projects. The FTA New Start program typically takes more than a decade to get done. Tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. There's a lot of communities like Iowa City, North Liberty, Coralville that need mobility. What's a different way of doing it? Using the best assets and the best capability that are in place, coexist and make something happen safely, effectively, and we want to lower the risk. With the FTA program, communities have to make huge investment commitments for the rolling stocks, the passenger cars, the stations, the track. And by the time you get done, it is very, very expensive. And a huge part of America does not have access to it. So in our small part, in our small way, we're trying to change that equation, working with partners like Iowa City, Coralville, North Liberty, and the Krandic to bring mobility now. And it may sound trite, and I'm not being light on this matter, but because we lease it, we've already put all the money into the cars, all the development. It doesn't have that risk. Truly what we have in place, and I'm talking to Katie and the whole team, I think I've had at least 12 presentations to the combined community. Try it out. Be a 3-year demonstration. And if that works great, which we're confident it will, you can keep the equipment, or you've got enough data, enough evidence of what your citizenry, the benefits, as the previous speaker talked about, getting to work, getting to have the mobility, to be able to have that position without having such a huge expenditure of transportation or sitting in traffic. With those combined benefits, that gives you a leg up, front of the line of even a larger project in the future. Our best outcome is either you keep the equipment, or just like the circus, you get done with the demonstration, we take our great little trains, we put them on a truck, we take our platforms down, and we go to the next town. That's really what we want to do. But it's all about cooperation. It's all about collaboration. It's all about understanding and having wide, candid, open discussions of how these various objectives can be aligned and do a good thing.
Thanks, Nate. That brings up kind of the collaboration discussion of our regional transit system just for the Iowa City, Coralville, North Liberty area. And there's been a great success with Fare Free. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about Fare Free Transit is cited as kind of the solution to increase ridership and reduce congestion. What challenges and opportunities do you see in expanding that throughout the region, Cedar Rapids, other places? But also if you could highlight when and how Iowa City municipality will decide whether to extend that program.
It's a great question. Yeah. Fare Free is definitely one of the levers, and one of the important, and the fare in general is one of the important ways that you can improve transit usage, and in our 1-year pilot, we certainly saw a large increase, that 43% increase. That's about 500,000 more people rode transit last year just with that one change. So, it seems so easy to just take the fare away, and trust me, if it was that easy, all communities would be doing it. But there's a matter of financing. So the first thing to consider is the fare loss. So, I will say that people in the public maybe aren't in the transit world or municipal governments probably overestimate the amount of or the percentage of our overall revenues that the fare makes up. I will say that it makes up around 10% of our revenue. So I think some people might think that we're funding transit, wholly or majority in part by those fare revenues, and it's not the case. Transit in Iowa City and transit across the country is heavily subsidized by the federal government. So first and foremost, I want to say that. That said, it's not an insignificant amount of money that needs to be replaced. To be quite fair, so that's the first thing, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But the second piece I want to mention first is that when you do remove the fare, you will see an increase in transit use. And you also need to be prepared to be able to have the additional capital equipment, the additional buses, the additional staffing to be able to handle that increase. And we studied a fare-free system in the Iowa City area transit study. We intentionally studied it. We had our consultants say, hey, if we wanted to consider this, what would the costs look like? Because we needed to know what we're dealing, what are the capital costs, how many more buses we need, how many more staff members will we need, how many more drivers. And to be quite honest, before the pandemic hit, it was out of our reach for the near term because it was multiple millions of dollars to get additional buses, to get the additional staff that you would need to handle what we were projecting at that time was a 40 to 60% ridership increase, which turns out to be pretty good estimate because that's kind of where we landed. I hate to say that there's any bright sides to a global pandemic, but one would be that our ridership, as the ridership did across the country on all transit, decreased to the point where if we did go fare free, we would not have to add staff or add buses. We had the capacity to pilot this program that we had been thinking about for years and trying to figure out how we could make it potentially work in our community. So again, a bright spot of the pandemic. Let's not go through that again to get to where we're at right now. But I'm happy to say that we were able to truly pilot fare free and see the impact on the community. And the community really embraced the program. Now, in terms of where we're headed, so we're 1 year into the pilot. The council, we had planned for a 2-year pilot, so we are still moving forward until next July. We had the funding allocated for a 2-year pilot, and we checked in with the city council in August to get a temperature check on whether we should continue past that 2-year pilot. Reason we had to check in is because our fare boxes, what we use to actually collect the revenue on the buses, are aged out of production, and we will need to replace them if we return to a fare. So we had to pose that question, and I'm happy to report that the council indicated support for continuing past the 2-year pilot project into the future. So now it's up to us to work behind the scenes and try to identify short to medium to long-term funding sources to help support and supplant the fare revenues that are foregone.
And you said again, that's about 10%, right? Is that still, that was before fare free, it was about 10%. So you'll need to cover that. Yes. Now, a question came in from our audience here, and I'm going to add to it as well because it's a great question. They're wondering if there's a possibility of a future combined transit system in the metro area. And I'm wondering too, if you could maybe talk a little bit about the kind of structure behind that might win the federal rules around a combined regional transit authority, but also the idea that maybe it doesn't need to be a formal regional transit authority. What if we had something that felt like a combined transit system by agreement if we can't meet the federal definition due to size?
So regional transit system discussion has been circulating in our communities for some time. I think I have a news article in the conference room next door That's a discussion about it in 1981. So this is not the first time, but there's a lot of talk within the last year or so again about a regional transit system. And right now we operate as a 3-agency system. So we have Iowa City Transit, we have Coralville Transit, we have CAMBUS. We each sort of have our own missions. Clearly, CAMBUS serves the university across metro areas in some cases. Coralville serves primarily Coralville residents, and Iowa City primarily serves within the municipal boundary of Iowa City. So it is something that has been explored before in the past, and I think we'll continue to have discussions about it. I think one major challenge is that each entity or each agency has sort of a very different funding structure and different employee structure. For example, CAMBUS has student employment. Iowa City does not have very many students. We have different pay ranges. We have different pay structures. And then I think most importantly, each one of us has a different financial structure. And I think that's been part of the hurdles that we have experienced in the past in creating a one system, I should say, one agency, one system. What we have done in recent years to try to work better together as a 3-agency system is Coralville and CAMBUS both joined Iowa City in the Iowa City area transit study. That's why it's not the Iowa City transit study, because we were looking for ways that we can improve our system together. How do we work better together? Where do we have overlapping service that we don't necessarily, that we have a lot of empty seats we're sending to one location? So that was our, I'd say, most recent attempt to kind of formalize and right-size our 3-agency system. I think those conversations are going to continue. I don't think that we've gotten all parties on board with a way to move forward with that. But I think it's an ongoing discussion that we'll continue to have.
Could you, and I'll head over to Mike, but I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the MPO and its role in regional transit.
So the MPO supports all 3 transit agencies, and the MPO is the federal recipient of the funding that we get in the metropolitan area to help support transit. I mentioned earlier that like all transit agencies, we're heavily supported federally because they view transportation as a public good. And so those funds do go through the MPO. The MPO and the MPO board ultimately approves the distribution of those funds to either Coralville, CAMBUS, or the city of Iowa City as we receive those funds locally once every year.
Great. Now I see Kelly Schneider is in our participants, and she can't pipe in here because we're the panelists on this session, but I want to give credit to her Trip Connect program that she launched out of Johnson County, really targeting folks that need a range of community support services, but also increasing access to employment opportunities. And Mike, I wonder if you can talk first a little bit about how do transportation barriers affect the populations that Horizon serves, but also maybe what have you been doing about it, and especially with the Trip Connect program in Johnson County?
Okay. I'll talk first about some stuff we do in Cedar Rapids. And you mentioned earlier, you talked about microtransit. Well, we are microtransit. And it's, back to the advantages and disadvantages. We're very flexible in what we can do. We don't have to go through 3 readings of council or 10-year studies or anything like that to do it. People ask us, and if we can, figure out a way to partner and find the money to do it, we do it. And some examples are like Young Parents Network in Cedar Rapids. We've worked with them for the past 18 years and provided rides to prenatal and parenting groups. The Cedar Rapids buses used to stop at about 6:30. They run an extra hour now, but and it's a hub and spoke system where it's got a central location, a ground transportation center where all the buses come in and then you switch and go out. And that's really, if you're, handling 3 kids or something and trying to get to a class, it's a cumbersome system. And so we work with them and take them directly to the classes. And we do about 70 program participants each Thursday. And it's a lot of work. A lot of them, they aren't English speakers, and they're all pretty much low income, but it's a lot of coordination to get this done. But we've done that for a long time. We have a partnership right now with the Eastern Iowa Health Center, and they're the federally qualified health center in our region. And most of their patients are vulnerable populations, and they were struggling with no-shows. And coming to your appointment that's a pretty strong indicator of a health outcome. You need to get people to come to the appointments. So we developed a partnership where we provide the drivers. They were able to purchase a bus. We provide the drivers and give them access. I mentioned the app earlier, to our scheduling software, and we provide about 300 to 400 rides per month to and from medical appointments for them. And we're also working on a similar partnership right now with Unity Point in Cedar Rapids. They have some issues with hospital discharges, and so we need to work through it with them. Actually, I got a phone call we had some HIPAA discussions about who would be able to see whose ridership, and I think we're going to be able to work through that. And Catherine McCauley Center, the Rides for Refugees. A couple of years ago, as people remember, there was an influx of Afghan refugees that came into the city. And one of the places every refugee or immigrant has to go is to a federally qualified health center so they can get immunized and those type of things. And we were able to, through our app, add Pashto. I think that's right. Pashto is the language that they speak in Afghanistan, and allowed them access to the transportation to get to where they needed to go, whether it was medical appointments or wherever it was. And there was really it was really a lot more difficult than you would think at first glance. Like, there's cultural things, like the women, we couldn't have a male driver or a male in the vehicle, I don't think, when we were transporting female riders. And there's a lot of Afghan participants in the Young Parents Network that I talked about earlier, so we still deal with that. But so we had women riders, or we allowed them to have people ride with them to make it work. Anyway, made that whole thing work. And in partnership with the city in Cedar Rapids and the county, we have an homeless overflow shelter that operates each winter, like November to March, basically, when the temperatures are really cold. So how do you get people? It's hard to, build a shelter where the people are. So, we provide a shuttle from a place that homeless people tend to congregate, the library, out to, they've moved the shuttle location a couple times, but we provide the transportation for that. And, we put a lot of programs like that together, a lot of partnerships, youth programs, Marion Cares, or Kids on Course, if you've heard of that. And right now we're trying to focus a little bit more on older adults. We work with a lot of older adults through our programming here at Horizons. We operate a large Meals on Wheels program that serves both Lynn and Johnson County. So, by definition, they're homebound seniors, and socialization is a strong indicator on health outcomes. So anyway, I'll jump down to Johnson County here, and we're very excited that Kelly Schneider has put this together. Great job, Kelly. Glad you're listening. And we started a couple of years ago, I believe. We did a pilot down there to try to identify who would use the service or where the service was needed. And it's a couple things I believe that they're trying to tackle. Again, I'm not super close in contact with this, but it's probably hours of operation maybe, and geographic location would probably be the two big things. But rural locations and locations in the urban area, with a fixed route, you can't touch every area. I'm sure Darian does a great job of getting to where they need it the most, but there's always little pockets where people can't get to. So we've signed a contract with them. We're gonna start as soon as we can get our scheduling software figured out, where we're gonna operate 2 vehicles with our app that I discussed earlier. People can get on their phone like an Uber, and they can order up the app. There might be a 2-hour, maybe they could schedule it 2 hours before. It might not be totally on demand, but that'll run Sunday through Friday from 5 p.m. to midnight, and we will cover some rural areas north of Interstate 80, as well as the metro area, North Liberty, Coralville, Iowa City, in the metro area. So we're very excited to get that going. It's a It's a 2-year pilot, and we hope that it works out and we're able to expand it to serve all of Johnson County. And it's always a difficult thing. You know, the more rural it is, the harder it is to serve. Lack of funding that's been brought up here a couple times. And I just took a trip to Chicago a couple of weeks ago and noticed that the gas is like $1 more a gallon. And I think that's probably due to, I don't think any money, Darian knows better than me probably, I don't think any of the gas tax money goes to transit in Iowa. In Illinois, I'm pretty sure it does. And that's why we have a robust system. And people they don't like new taxes. We struggle up here. There's a levy, a transit levy, and it's been at the level it's been for quite some time. And people don't like to raise taxes, even though it doesn't seem like a lot. It's hard to get reelected when you do that. So it's a whole push and pull on this. But I would love to see them put some transit, raise the gas tax a little bit, put some transit money in there so we can all do our jobs better and serve more people and get people where they need to go, and both reduce the carbon footprint, as Darian's talking about, and get people to medical appointments and work. So
That's, I think, our biggest excitement for the Trip Connect program in Johnson County is the opportunities to connect rural residents with workforce opportunities in our larger communities. And especially when you're looking at shift work with start times that can be at different times throughout the evening and the morning. So we appreciate you bidding on that contract, and we're looking forward to seeing the results.
Well, we get calls from rural employers, or you know, anytime we start talking to somebody about transportation, it's not cheap. It's not cheap. It's very expensive. You know, and especially if you're doing a demand response type ride, it's just very expensive. And I used to kid those conferences I talked about. I'd kid around with people and say the only way they could do it more expensive is if they had like a helicopter come in and pick them up instead of us. It's expensive. Trains are a lot more efficient. If you can get a whole group of people together and do it, that works great. But
I heard a story that someone said, it'd be great is if we could get these autonomous vehicles all lined up and give them their own track, and then they would all line up and do that. And someone said, yes, that's a train. So Nate, thinking about trains, wondering if you can talk a little bit about the sustainability. We have access to biodiesels, we have access to battery powered trains now. How can we use those to further our climate goals? And seeing what we are, I think you're still in Peru because you couldn't fly back to the US because of climate issues. So if you could talk a little bit with us about what opportunities rail has for meeting climate action goals.
Well, in the larger sense, I'm going to talk freight for just a second and quickly bring it down to moving our citizens. So typically, if you were to put cargo on a freight train, as opposed to having it on the road, immediately it reduces CO2 emissions by 67%. If you look at some alternative propulsion with those diesel electric locomotives, either biodiesel, liquefied natural gas, you can cut that carbon reduction down to 90% versus highway. So compelling benefits. It's physics. It's the lowest resistance on land is steel wheel and steel rail. It's been like that since the 19th century, and we've gotten better to optimize it to make that happen. On the side of citizenry and how you can compete with the urgency to reduce carbon, we have a battery train that can have a range of up to 120, 130 miles between charges. That is downhill, flat, with the best operator you've ever hired and a tailwind. So realistically, that'd be 80 to 90 miles. But again, you can do that today by having in the afternoon periods of time where you might have a little longer time span between departures, you can recharge those batteries and make them work. And then, as you know, Iowa is the second largest producer of renewable energy, renewable electricity in the USA. So that combines out to be quite effective. So we're getting there. The battery type of tool to propel trains is much more applicable to passenger service than it is freight. Freight's so heavy. It's so heavy. You're moving so much that some big challenges to decarbonize freight network. But keep in mind that it already versus highway is 67% less CO2 per ton mile. So these types of, we've got it pragmatic, it can happen. An alternative set that we can deploy is with what we call diesel multiple unit trains, but we run those in Germany. We've got a big operation in Germany, and we've been running those with renewable diesel for a year and a half, and they work great. You can't let the perfect get in the way of the good. You've got to try things. You've got to prototype them. You've got to optimize them, but you've got to start. And that's where we see things going, of pragmatic improvements. But the biggest opportunity for decarb is in the passenger side. For additional decarb is in the passenger side versus the freight. And don't forget, NOx and PM 2.5. Those are also very important aspects to think about when you're moving people or freight through our communities.
You said PM 2.5?
Yeah.
And NOx. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that is?
NOx is nitrous oxide. It's a pollutant of internal combustion. PM is particulate matter, 2.5 micrograms. The EPA, the National Institute of Health, I'm sure University of Iowa's Medical Center has really found the problem with PM 2.5. It can be cancerous. It can be a real problem. I'm no expert at this, but there are some thoughts that one of the challenges and facets that's involving the asthma pandemic with children could be PM 2.5. So that's something we need to get rid of as well. And best way is if you can find mechanisms to have mass transit versus personal owned vehicles, you get a long ways to reducing those pollutants.
And even I think if families consider reducing the number of vehicles, knowing that we might not be able to get to zero in a household, at least in a community like Cedar Rapids or Iowa City, if we can reduce our vehicle trips, that would help. You said freight is 60. Can you share that percentage again? The percentage that even freight is more efficient climate-wise?
On freight side, if you take a truck trailer and you put it on a train versus putting it on the highway, you reduce CO2 by 67%. Get alternative fuels, biofuel, LNG, you cut that emission reduction by 90%. So we do need to decarbonize the rail network. We do need to do that. But the first step to doing that is to putting more containers, more trailers on the train to reduce the. You've been on I-80. You see how much that volume is, and that's a contributor as well.
So I want to make sure our participants that are attending have a chance to submit any questions that they have. And so if you can put those in where you'd like to see those answered. And in the interim, I would like to ask each of our panelists to talk a little bit about what do you want Iowans to know about the future of public transportation in both rural and urban areas, and really how it impacts Iowa today. And we'll start with Darian.
All right, this is a great question. And we think a lot in Iowa City about the future of public transit. So this one's near and dear to us. So I'm going to mostly focus on urban because that's where I spend most of my time thinking about. But I will say it's become crystal clear to me that we can no longer depend on a personal automobile to solve all of our mobility problems. There's been a lot of unintended consequences that we've discovered over the last 100 and so years since the automobile was invented, and it's done amazing things in terms of our mobility as Americans. But there's also, again, a lot of unintended consequences with climate change, with urban sprawl, with health. Getting around town used to involve a little bit more personal mobility, and it's we don't have as much of that built into our days anymore. The costs are, it averages $12,000 a year for somebody to own and maintain a vehicle. And that's a lot. And for somebody that's on a lower end of the income spectrum, that is, a bridge too far. And we've also built our community so that in some ways people have to take a car. So to get from point A to point B. So it's clear to me that we need to invest in a true multimodal transportation system. There's quite honestly, we're in a growing area here in the Iowa City area, and there's not enough space to be able to have everyone, getting from point A to point B in a personal automobile, but often that has just one person in it. So investing in urban areas, in the bike infrastructure, investing in the pedestrian infrastructure. And for those trips where, it's too far, that those aren't the right tools for the job and a vehicle is the right tool, then investing in a transit system that can carry more people across town more efficiently, more sustainably. So that's something that I think of when I think of the future. I think it's nice to see that because of climate action, we're really turning back towards the transit system, which is perhaps the greatest tool that municipalities and communities have to combat climate change and simultaneously ensure there's equitable access to job opportunities, education opportunities, shopping opportunities, a tool to an engine of the economy. Transit systems do all of these great things, and not just fixed route. That's van pool, that's paratransit, that's fixed route, that's rail. I mean, we really need to start thinking about transit as being, again, the transportation service of choice in a community, and we need to start thinking about how we can better support other modes other than just how do we make it more efficient for somebody to drive from point A to point B, because we have these unintended consequences and that now we're really starting to deal with.
Really are. So Mike, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you would want Iowans to know about the future of public transportation, and also maybe where you see microtransit fitting in.
I think Microtransit could do a lot more in Cedar Rapids. I don't have enough time here to probably explain all that, but I'll say a couple really unmet needs that I see in Iowa are, one, rural transportation. I went and visited with Mert Bowers yesterday. She used to run the senior center here in Cedar Rapids, the Whitwer Center that closed down with the flood of '08. And we're looking at a older adult center here at Horizon. So I went out to speak to her about that, and I don't know, she must be in her 80s by now, and she lives on a farm on the outskirts of Mount Vernon. So I drove out there, and while I was talking to her, I was very pleasantly surprised to find that her two adult children were moving back to Mount Vernon and would be able to help her with, everything. But one of those pieces is transportation. And there's a lot that goes into that, is it rides to doctor's appointments, the grocery store, or, let's not forget social events. If older adults, and particularly in Iowa, there's a lot of isolated older adults can't get to social events, there's an increased risk of depression and cognitive decline. And we need to pay attention to that. And I don't think anybody wants to end up in a care facility. I know I don't want to. So the longer we can keep people in their homes, the better off we all are. If we have better health outcomes, older adults have high health costs, and it's in our best interest, it's through Medicare. So it's in our best interest to keep those costs down and keep them healthy. It's good for them, good for us, good for our overburdened healthcare system. And so that's rural and urban. As I talked about, we're starting a older adult center here at Horizons, trying to do that. An issue is, how do we get people here? And, it's different for older adults. It's difficult to climb on and off a bus, or even if it's paratransit, you need to have the right vehicle to make it comfortable for them and the right way for them to schedule rides. And that population is growing. Myself being a boomer, they expect the boomers the over 60 or 65 to grow by 35% by 2030. That's a lot. And that's in fact the only demographic of the population that's going to grow. All the other age groups are pretty flat, but that's the population that's going to grow. So I think we really need to pay attention to that. And to me, the best solution I can think of, especially in the rural areas that are so hard to serve, is grassroots efforts with volunteer driver programs and those types of things. So that's what I'd like people to think about.
Well, and Nate, I'm coming to you next, but first I'm going to go back to Darian to ask, we had a question come in about e-bikes and bike share programs, and how could that fit into a bigger public transit plan? So while we have 5 minutes, I wanted to get that before we go back to Nate.
Sure. I think e-bikes are car replacement devices. That's what I think about e-bikes. They're amazing. And if you haven't been on an e-bike, I highly recommend checking one out because they flatten hills. You can arrive at work without barely breaking a sweat. They're a lot of fun. You get fresh air. I can't imagine a better way to get to work. You can carry, groceries on an e-bike. I think they're fantastic. So I see them as part of our future. I see that as part of that multimodal future. And you are starting to see a lot more electronic micromobility devices, bikes, a variety of different types of scooters and things like that around town, especially with the university being central here. So we have tried on multiple occasions to upstart a bike program, a shared bike program here in Iowa City. And I think the pandemic is what thwarted us the last time. Before that, it was a big change in technology. They were going from, I would call them analog bikes to digital bike or to e-bikes, and then e-scooters. So it's on our strategic plan. It's something to continue to evaluate and find the right partner for Iowa City. Like I said, we had a contract with a company, and it was ultimately not fulfilled, and it was kind of on their end. So it has been a real struggle, and I think it's just because of the rapidly changing business environment of micromobility and electric micromobility. So it's on our strategic plan, and it's something that we're still looking into for the future.
I'm a new e-bike owner, and I have had trouble creating new commuting patterns. I wanted to do it more often, but I'm wondering, that's a big challenge with the idea of bringing passenger rail here, Nate. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that, and how would you change behavior of people that are so used to driving in a personal car, or how do you get them into an e-bike? How do you get them into a train? How do you get them into that? And maybe what else would you want Iowans to know about the future of public transportation here?
Well, but bikes and e-bikes and light rail transit is like a Reese's peanut butter cup. It's chocolate and peanut butter, two great things that go together. We have space on our trains where you can set your bikes in. There's racks, plenty of capability, wide doors to get in and out. And then if there is rain or there is snow, you can cut your bike trip short and take the train for a good portion. So it works very, very well. It also helps with parking. You don't need to have massive parking at stations. So I have been a cyclist most of my life and a big zealot to what that can do together. So I think what Darian said, these are truly, at least it might get rid of one of the family members' POV, personally owned vehicle, by having that mobility. So very big advocate. On the other question of what questions or what messages I would give to Iowa on light rail transit and how it can become, I think what Mike and Darian had said is this. Each spokesperson talks of creativity, of new ways, of collaboration to connect us. The disadvantage is light rail transit has largely been that of major urban areas. So it's hard to get in the game. But at the same time, it might not be such a bad thing because one can be inventive, one can be pragmatic, and one can do it out of the limelight, frankly, to create these connections. Here's an analogy, and I will be quick. I really will this time. Years ago, I was working in Mexico. We needed phones. So we would call Telmex. We need another phone in the office. The wait time was 2 years. You could not get a phone. So yes, I'm old enough to say this, as the flip phones came out, as the Motorola flip phones came out, mobile devices, the adoption rate in Mexico, other parts of Latin America, of wireless telephones went through the roof. And now in our own homes, we don't have fixed lines. Many of us don't have fixed lines anymore. Well, congratulations, you're about 20 years behind of others who've had to do that before because of the lack of alternatives. I think that pragmatically, this can be done cost effectively and using good old Midwestern ingenuity, hard work, and neighborly care for each other. I know that sounds corny, but I really believe that can work. Major commuter networks, major commuter agencies on the coast in Chicago, Philadelphia, Boston, New York have got big problems right now. They've got very, very large networks with very high cost, and too many people work from home. Congratulations, I work from home as well once in a while. So they're looking at how can they take these major, very sticky, very high cost networks and reconfigure them. We don't have to do that in Iowa. We can create it, set it up to the needs of our citizenry today for a lot less, and I think a lot faster. I hope that made some sense.
It did, and thank you so much. We are at 4 o'clock now, so our participants have, I'm so glad that we had such a full panel today for them because it's been really awesome to talk about microtransit, fare-free, future of rail, passenger rail, all the opportunities that are for both rural and urban public transit. And so I just want to thank each of you again for your time. Again, Darian Nagel-Gam from the City of Iowa City, Mike Barnhart from Horizons, and Nate Asplin from Railroad Development Corporation. Thank you so much. Again, I'm Katie Gerlach. I'm the Senior Director of Community Development for Greater IC. And, again, thank you to the Iowa Ideas Conference for giving us a space here to just make these, have these important conversations. And thank you again to UFG Insurance and ITC for sponsorship. So thank you all so much, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Take care. Thank you.